And joining us now for analysis, American law professor Jessica Levinson of Loyola Law School. Thanks so much for joining us again, Professor. President Trump is claiming vindication, but Democrats and even some Republican lawmakers say it doesn't necessarily clear the president here. So does the president still need to be careful?
Yes, in a word. I mean, this is very bizarre to me. One, that the president would think that this vindicates him. What we're talking about with respect to the Nunes Memo is very narrow. It's whether or not the FISA court was correct when they granted a electronic warrant to wiretap Carter Page. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Russia investigation. It has absolutely nothing to do with what Robert Mueller, who was appointed as a special counsel much later in time, is doing with respect to looking at obstruction of justice and false and misleading statements and potential conspiracy. And frankly, the most surprising thing to me about the memo is that Democrats were so worried about it coming out because, legally speaking, I think it's like coals for Christmas. I mean, it's actually bizarre to me that they were so worried about it.
But doesn't it matter that Steele was being paid $160,000 by the DNC and the Clinton Foundation or the Clinton campaign as part of opposition research? Does that matter?
Well, I think it certainly says it could talk about where he's coming from, what his motivations are, whether or not he could be biased, and let's not pretend it couldn't indicate that. But in terms of the Nunes Memo and in terms of the law, so whether or not he's biased, frankly, is more of a political issue than a legal issue. So it would be incredibly surprising to me if the FISA court said, well, there's the Steele document, and so that's enough for us. I mean, the truth is, when you're asking a FISA court to provide you with a search warrant, you're giving a lot of information. So one, it's not clear to us that the FBI didn't say, Christopher Steele, he was being paid, and this is why he might be biased. Even if they didn't say that, it's not clear to me that the FISA court judge didn't do his job in granting that warrant. And that's really the name of the game here. It's not a broader conversation about whether or not President Trump is vindicated, even though he's trying to make it one.
Now, the Democrats are making their move to get their side of this story out. What risk does President Trump run in not clearing its release?
Well, normally I'd say he runs an enormous risk. He would look like a hypocrite. So why would we release, on the one hand, the Republican memo, particularly when the Republicans said the whole point of releasing this memo is because we believe in transparency. But I think with respect to President Trump, there is no typically, and there is no kind of conventional paradigm that we can put him into. So frankly, I think the political risk is much, much less. I mean, look, the people who think that President Trump might have done something improper with Russia continue to think that before and after the Nunes memo. And the people who support him will continue to think that whether or not he agrees to release the Democratic memo.
Let's move on to another topic. Democrat Illinois Senator Dick Durbin says a deal is not likely to be reached on DACA before government funding expires later this week. What risk do Democrats run in taking a hard line on this battle?
Well, look, they run a risk of the Republicans saying, as we're hurtling towards the midterms, look who shut down the government. It was the Democrats, because they couldn't come to an agreement, and so now the lights aren't on, and that's why we ground to a halt. On the other hand, Democrats run the risk, if they don't take a hard line with DACA, of people saying, well, you abandon your base and you abandon all these promises of saying that you were going to stick to DACA. So in a way, it's a lose-lose. I did say we're hurtling towards the midterms, but people tend to have very short memories right before elections, and so I'm not sure that this is a game changer for anyone at this point. There's still so many more moving parts.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts. Interesting week for sure. Professor Jessica Levinson from Loyola Law School, thanks so much again.
Thank you.